Welcome everyone to part 2 of Build 50. I mentioned at the end of part 1 that I was going to be changing the coolant from Mayhem's Pastel Black to X1 Orange, and it's just because the black blends too much with the components. I was just experimenting with this coolant. But I didn't end up shooting when I put in the orange, so I thought I'd show you another angle of when I put in the black. Something to remember with distribution plates is always use a long fill tube on a 90-degree fitting. I usually use about a 200mm fill tube. It really helps to get the air out. And you get surge often when you switch off the pump, so it can prevent spills and leaks. But you can see that filling a Wraith is very easy. Filling Spectre is similar. There's a good fluid volume in the reservoir, so the air comes out quite quickly. With Spectre 1 and 2, there was actually a little trick. You got to switch off the pump to let the air come out after it's gathered at the top of the reservoir. But with Spectre 3, you don't have to do that anymore. The air comes out very quickly and easily. So the power supply is usually the last thing I install into a Wraith build. It's just the way it works out. Component order is really important, and then the cables go completely last. Usually I install the LED strips a little bit earlier, but I'm installing them quite late. The reason to install them a bit earlier than this is because once you have all of the components in like this, it can be hard to plug in the LED strips. Just the challenges of ITX. You really have to think about the order in which you do things. What I'm doing next is actually quite a bad example of that. I'm installing the cables after installing the cable shroud. What you should do is keep the cover off the cable shroud, install all of the cables, and then that cover goes on last. But the problem is, on the older version of Wraith, when you flat mount the SSDs like this, the fasteners are underneath. So the cable shroud really has to go on first. You could keep it uninstalled and just thread the cables through and kind of keep moving it around until you have all of the cables done and in position. And that is something I may try next, but this is actually something that we've fixed on the new version of Wraith. You can keep that cable shroud out, put all of the cables in, just have the stainless steel rods sticking up, and then the cover goes on last. But if you don't flat mount the SSDs, because you can actually side mount them, there's another position underneath the GPU. There's a lot of other ways that you can do this, a lot of variables. But it's definitely a lot easier to get those cables in when that cable shroud is out of the way. People often ask, why didn't we do integrated cable management in Wraith, like in Spectre? And it's because the cable runs are so short that the only way that integrated cable management could actually be used is if you made every single wire strand a different length. And not many people are doing that. I mean, custom cables are hard enough as it is without having to bend your cables and then cut everything perfectly so that the bends are exactly where you want them to be. And this is generally for ITX systems. The cables are so short that they're kind of just suspended in midair, and they're quite hard to manage and get clean. So we didn't want to make things too difficult for people, and we instead opted for this cable shroud, which is also the SSD mounting panel.